Good morning. I would be remiss or wrong if I did not mention that we need our elected officials to govern to completion. Whenever you hear an individual speak, they may use terms like, when the American people wake up. You need to be asking, wake up and do what? The who, what, when, where, why, and how matters. And if you're not getting those answers, you better be asking those questions. It does not automatically mean to write an individual off that is saying that they want to represent you, but it does mean that they need to answer those questions. A lot of times we watch these congressional hearings, we watch these conversations, and we ask ourselves, or we should be asking ourselves when we see these people talk, the American people deserve better. From who? Who do we deserve better from? The American people are going to wake up and see that there's a problem. And what are we going to do about it? Where does it matter? See, we have been taught, just like myself, we have all been taught that when we vote in these elected officials, that is our voice. But we have noticed through legislation that those voices have been diminished. I am simply saying that what I am going to do is implement a piece of legislation, which will most likely be a fight, but I will implement a piece of legislation that gives majority rule or conversation in relation to checks and balances back to the people. This means, again, that in 2020, if we had 7 million Floridians come to the voting pool, if we had that many individuals come, then that many individuals should have a voice to weigh in on pieces of legislation. It just makes sense because it has an effect. You should be thinking nationally on the same stage. Yes, it is difficult, but you cannot tell me that a TV show, that TV shows, that Disney, that all of these industries figured out a way to get votes in on different things that they wanted to do. And you mean to tell me that we cannot leverage that type of technology to also do the same things? And before anybody goes insane and says, well, what about cybercrime? What about crime in general? That's something that is not going to go away. But what we have to make sure is that we have healthy checks and balances. Right now in our society, we see a lot of conversations that are unhealthy, and it is dangerous. And we do not want to tear down the government and quote unquote rebuild it. There is a lot that goes into the ideal of anarchy. There's a lot that goes into quote unquote what we're seeing, which is multiple sides, but really two separate sides that are really wanting to verbally go after each other and what seemingly take one another out. It's probably the most disheartening thing when you think about democracy and you want to understand, hey, why is it that we cannot find representatives that seemingly can't agree on anything until it is too late? What is going on? Are you really that disconnected with every single person that walks next to you that if you have a conversation that there is no realm for you to find agreement? Because that is what our governments are looking like. This is from the state level all the way up to the federal level. We are seeing that the individuals that we keep voting in, we are not voting in individuals who want to work together. That's the problem. This is why millennials are now saying, hey, well, we don't see an issue with listening to both sides. We don't see an issue with that at all. We're not trying to drag ourselves into one identity or the other. But there have been plenty conversations about maybe moving away from a two-party system. Plenty conversations, because it has brought us a lot of issues. There are too many things that are unregulated, and it has hurt a whole ton of people. Yes, capitalism has its place. Yes, socialism has its place, but not without regulation. And both need regulation and oversight. It is very important. One of the major things that I want you guys to think about as we go through this portion of the election year is there again, and I've stated this before, there should be no job on this planet that is immune to checks and balances. Not one. We're not talking about people. Sometimes you have to remove yourself from the person and actually look at the definition of the word immunity. There should be no position that is immune from questions. And those questions have consequences. And we have allowed in our society a form of immunity based on position. And the problem is we cannot legislate morality. So if someone who does not carry your values or morals gets in the position and utilizes that position to do harm, they are immune. We can give no position immunity, and I mean no position. Every position should be able to be questioned and held accountable, whether it's good accountability or bad. But the immunity needs to be removed. But in order for that to happen, citizens have to have the right to not just speak about this. I'm so sick of people telling you, hey, well, contact your local legislative person, because they're gonna they send you back a generic letter because they can't talk to everybody. And we understand that one person cannot send out 1 million personal messages back. You would get nothing else done. Well, then you need to make a way that when your citizen speaks to you, it matters. And that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a way for when the citizens speak, it holds weight like we think it should, like we've been taught it does. We're just not voting individuals in and letting them go. Then when they get there, they use words like, we are servants of the people, but the people can't hold you accountable. How are you a servant of the people and you have forms of immunity? How are you a servant of the people and the people can't hold you accountable? I'm going to bring accountability to the legislation for the position. I'm going to bring accountability to legislation for the position. We are going to be held accountable to the people. And it will be a legislative battle, I am sure. It will be in courts. People will push back because it's going to affect or create a precedent that can be used in other areas. Again, that's why it's important to look and see what's happening in other states, because now some of the things you dislike that are happening in other states can now be argued in your state. If you go and if you look up the law, you will notice that it's precedence based. They set a precedence here, they argue that precedence, and they start to stack on top of it. This is how we get a lot of those laws put in place, and people wake up like, whoa, who thought this was going to happen? Because it already happened over there. Because the individuals in there are not being held accountable. So let's make sure that you understand. Do you really have a voice when you go out and the only thing that you do is vote an individual in, and it stops right there? I continue to say the conversation is not the consequence. The conversation is not the consequence. Let's govern to completion.